Will the real high priest please stand up? Welcome to Walking Through the Word. For today, we're in John chapter 18, and we just had the arrest of Jesus happen. And we kind of left off right around verse 12 when the detachment of soldiers arrested Jesus after Simon Peter cut off the ear of Malchus, which, by the way, John doesn't say it, but other accountings of the gospel say that the ear is healed. So just so you know, Malchus is good. So the detachment of soldiers, they arrest Jesus, they bind him, and they bring him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Okay, so we've got two characters to introduce, Annas and Caiaphas. Now, Caiaphas is the current high priest, and he was the one, according to verse 14, and we read earlier in John, who advised the Jewish leaders that it'd be good if one man died for the people. So we have these guys that Jesus is being brought to. Meanwhile, Simon Peter and another disciple, which by the way, this is John. Okay, we're pretty confident that this is John. We're following Jesus, and because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. So there's an outer courtyard and there's an inner courtyard. The inner courtyard is for Jewish people only, and those people that the high priest knows. The Jewish leaders didn't like to associate with Gentiles, so there was always these separation moments. Okay, so Peter, unfortunately, though, had to wait outside because, again, didn't know who this guy was. But the other disciple went in and said, "Hey, I vouch for him. He's good. He's safe." So Peter and John come in, and while he's walking in, the woman looks at Peter and says, "Weren't you one of his followers?" Which Peter replied for the first time, "I'm not." Now, remember what Jesus had told Peter before about the denying 3 times before the rooster crows. So we have time number 1. So this is all happening, and John says, meanwhile, here's what's happening with Jesus. So we have a little bit of setup of what's going to happen with Peter, but now we come back over to the important part, which is Jesus. And it says, meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples. And Jesus gives an answer and says, I've never made a secret of what I'm saying. I've always taught. I've said nothing in secret. Why are you asking? You're welcome to ask anyone that you want. And when Jesus said this, one of the officials slapped him and said, "Is this the way you answer to the high priest?" Okay, so he's apparently in front of the high priest, right? Well, hold that thought. If I said something wrong, Jesus said, testifies to what it is that I've done wrong, but if I've spoke truth, then why did you strike me? And then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Wait, so Jesus wasn't with the high priest? He was with Annas, but why does he keep saying high priest, high priest, high priest? 2 reasons. One, Annas was a high priest, and he passed it on to his son-in-law and also his sons. So there was more than one high priest. There was a rotation of high priests that was going on, and Caiaphas happened to be the one that was at the time. But Annas, kind of like an emeritus, never stopped being a high priest or looked at as an authority figure within the family. He was still the big man high priest. And so saying high priest there was certainly appropriate, as Annas had the freedom and the authority. Remember, we treat elders very differently from the way that they treated them back then. Elders were held in very high regard. They weren't looked at as getting older and getting out of date and out of tune. They were looked at as becoming wiser and more authoritative. We don't necessarily do that, though we probably should reconsider. So being called the high priest was not an inappropriate thing, but I believe that John was trying to do something else as well. John was making the contrast between these high priests and the high priest, Jesus. As the writer of Hebrews says in his sermon, the priest in the order of Melchizedek. Jesus is our high priest. And so John is trying to give a contrast here of which one of these is in the light, which one of these is more honorable, which one of these is acting more like the high priest, and the answer is Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. John is trying to contrast what these men are doing to show very clearly that what they are doing is not from God, but from man. It must be done, but John wanted to make it very clear as to who exactly was the real high priest in this situation. And as followers of Christ, we should be grateful for this. We should be grateful for the reminder of who our high priest is, who intercedes on our behalf. We are now able to enter into the Holy of Holies because of this great high priest who is Jesus. So as we continue to read, we're going to look and see some more of these compare and contrast that John does, and get a little bit more idea as we walk through and continue to walk through the passion of the Christ.